Welcome to at the rate of Monday Education. Now answer the following. 1. Who are the characters in this part of the story? Answer. There are 3 characters in this part of the story. Amu, a 10-year-old girl, her father and her younger brother. 2. Describe Amu's house and family. Answer. Amu's house was just a room in the servants' quarters of the big house. There were 3 people in her family. She had father and younger brother in her family. Her father made Ammu work and was not interested in her study. 3. Who was Chellappa? What did he tell Ammu? Answer. Chellappa was Ammu's father. He told Ammu to work as a maid at new owner of the big house. He wanted her to earn money for the family and for the education of his younger brother Chinni. 4. Did Ammu want to go to school? How did her father react to Ammu's wish to go to school? Answer. Yes, Ammu wanted to go to school. His father didn't want Ammu to send to school. His father told that education didn't serve any meaning to her and she would get married before completing the 3rd grade and it would not be useful for her. 5. Do you think Ammu's father would send her to school? Answer. No, I don't think that Ammu's father would send her to school. Now answer the following. 1. Who was the new owner of the house? What was she like? Answer. The new owner of the house was a lady named Mrs. Mohan. She was a slim, grey-haired lady who was a widow. 2. What did Ammu do at Mrs. Mohan's house the next morning? Answer. Ammu went to Mrs. Mohan's house next morning and washed few vessels in the sink. 3. What drew Ammu like a magnet? What did she do then? Why? Answer. When Ammu went to the drawing room, the bookcase drew her attention. She then fingered the books lovingly and gazed at the pictures in a book. Because she was interested in reading and wanted to go to school. 4. Mrs. Mohan asked Ammu if she wanted to go to school. Did she did she say anything about her brother? Answer. When Mrs. Mohan asked Ammu if she wanted to go to school, Ammu said that she would love to go to school, but her father wanted her younger brother Chinni to send to school. She also told that her father was sending Chinni to school from next week. 5. What did Ammu say to Mrs. Mohan? Answer. Ammu said to Mrs. Mohan that her father didn't allow her to go to school and wanted her younger brother to take education instead of her. 6. Will Mrs. Mohan help her to go to school? Answer. Yes, Mrs. Mohan seems to be a nice and kind lady, so she may help Ammu to go to school. Answer the following questions. 1. What important event took place in the last part of the story? Answer. Mrs. Mohan was a kind woman. She felt sad when she came to know about Ammu's desperation for education. In the last part of the story, we saw that Mrs. Mohan, who was a headmistress, decided to teach Ammu every day at her home. 2. What did Mrs. Mohan plan to help Ammu? Answer. Mrs. Mohan came up with a plan that Ammu would visit her after completing her household chores, and Mrs. Mohan would teach her as long as Ammu wanted. 3. Why was Ammu not ready to accept Mrs. Mohan's help to begin with? Answer. Mrs. Mohan asked to stop working and start going to school, and told her that she would pay her fees. But Ammu told that her father would not agree. She was also worried about that who would cook for her father and brother, and who would work for Mrs. Mohan. 4. What was the next plan that Mrs. Mohan had? Answer. When Ammu told Mrs. Mohan that there was no one to cook for her father and brother, and also she had to complete the work given at Mrs. Mohan's house, then Mrs. Mohan planned that after completing her course, Ammu would learn as long as she wanted. 5. What made Ammu happy at the end? Answer. Ammu requested Mrs. Mohan to start teaching on that day itself, and Mrs. Mohan began teaching with the alphabet. Ammu learnt for an hour, and that made her happy. 6. What was Ammu's first step towards her goal? Answer. Ammu's studying at Mrs. Mohan's home was her first step towards her goal. Answer the following questions in about 50 words each. 1. Who was Chellappa? What did he want Ammu to do? Answer. Chellappa was a watchman at a big house. He was a selfish and uncaring father. He wanted his daughter Ammu to work as a maid for the new owner of the big house and earn money. He didn't approve his daughter's wish of taking up education. Instead, he wanted her to work and wished to send his son to school. 2. Why was Ammu unhappy? Who made her happy? Answer. Ammu was unhappy because her desire of studying was shattered by her father. She wanted to go to school, but her father didn't allow her. When she was sent to Mrs. Mohan's house as a maid, there Mrs. Mohan realized that Ammu had strong desire to study. So Mrs. Mohan planned and told Ammu to visit her after completing her course and study as long as she wanted. And on that day itself, Mrs. Mohan taught her alphabets. Mrs. Mohan's effort in teaching made her happy. 3. Collect information about Mrs. Mohan from the story and write a paragraph about her. Answer. Mrs. Mohan was an old widow who was the new owner of the house. She was a slim, grey-haired lady. She had a daughter who was married and lived in Bombay. She was a retired headmistress. She was an educated woman who was kind enough. When she realized Ammu's passion for study, she thought of opening school for the unprivileged girls like Ammu. She wanted Ammu to go to school and was even ready to pay her fees. She was generous. She came with a plan that made Ammu happy and complete her desire to study. Mrs. Mohan was a good-natured woman. 4. Which character do you like the most? Why? Answer. I like Ammu's character the most because Ammu is an obedient and hardworking girl. She obeys everything that her father tells. She has a deep passion for learning and wishes to take education. At Mrs. Mohan's house, she completes her given work. When Mrs. Mohan asks her to go to school, then Ammu gets worried about the work that has been assigned her to do. When Mrs. Mohan tells her about the second plan, she becomes happy, for she is taking the first step. When Mrs. Mohan tells her about the second plan, she becomes happy, for she is taking the first step towards her goal. She is an honest girl who does her work honestly. 5. Write a paragraph on Ammu's future. Answer. Ammu's future is looking bright. With the help and effort of Mrs. Mohan, Ammu will surely achieve her goal, as she is a hard-working girl. Ammu is a girl who has a passion for learning, and she will take every possible effort to make her dream come true. With the guidance of Mrs. Mohan, she will must achieve success in life. 6. How did the writer indicate the serious special problem and suggest solution to it? Answer. The writer has indicated the serious problem on girls' education. In India, there are still many people who believe that education of girls is a waste of money and time, so they prefer them to marry at an early stage. Still, there are many girls in India who don't get primary education. Due to this, the rate of illiteracy also increases. There are many ways to solve the above problem. It is important to create awareness among the people, especially in the rural areas. By creating awareness, people would understand the importance of girls' education. We can also take the help of educated women from the society to come together and put them as an example in front of the people. Government should also take proper steps towards the education of girls. Subscribe the channel for more videos.